You're listening to Level Up with Wondr, a podcast where we take listeners on a journey through the exciting world of gaming, tech, and innovation. Join the Wondr Nation team as we talk with a diverse group of pros who have taken their skills to the next level.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Level Up with Wondr. I'm Jordan Myhawk, and I'm a marketing coordinator here at Wondr Nation. March is Women's History Month and Problem Gambling Awareness Month, and we'll be talking to some amazing women who have made a lasting impact in the gaming industry. And today's guest is also an expert on all things problem gambling and responsible gaming related. I'd like to welcome Tammi Barlow to the show. Tammi has over a decade of experience in building and managing responsible gaming and corporate responsibility programs with companies like IGT, William Hill, Caesars Entertainment, and Rush Street Interactive. She's previously served as co-chairwoman of the Global Gaming Women DEI Committee and is currently the chairwoman of the Responsible Gaming Committee for the National Council on Problem Gambling. She's also a board member of the Massachusetts Council on Gaming and Health and African Americans in Gaming. She currently works at Bally's as the inaugural vice president of Global Responsible Gaming. So I just want to, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, Tammi. We're very happy to have you, and I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you for having me, and I'm excited to be here.
Great. So I thought we could just start off by talking about your current role with Bally's. So if you could tell me a little bit about your current position, what are you responsible for?
Yeah, so I am the inaugural vice president of Global Responsible Gaming. And what that means is get to work with a bunch of great people around the world who are all committed to consumer protection. Basically, we just look to ensure that we're meeting all regulatory requirements. That's first and foremost. But it also means that we look for ways also that we can improve the ways that we do things within the industry and within our own interactive platform and our casinos. We look for ways that we can better awareness around responsible gaming with our employees, within our communities. It means that we're partnering with, problem gambling councils throughout the United States. We are very, very much engaged in different accreditations to ensure that we are always holding ourselves to a higher standard. The other part of what I do is I work with our ESG committee. So Bally's is very committed to ESG. And so responsible gaming and guest safety is one of those pillars. But we also look at things in ESG, as you know, we look at DEI, we look at our employee awareness, we look at human trafficking, we look at a lot of different things that affect our industry. And I work with some really great people as well as some of our board members on our initiatives at Bally's. So that's sort of what I do.
Great. And I know you're still relatively new to this role, but what has been your proudest moment so far?
Actually, I'm glad you asked that because it just took place on Friday. So, one of the exciting things about this role is that Bally's has a amazing casino that they're building in the city of Chicago, and I am from Illinois. I'm from Evanston, but I represent Chicago. And there was the Illinois Council on Problem Gambling hosted its inaugural Blacks and African Americans Problem Gambling Conference. And Bally's was a sponsor. And it was really great to have an opportunity. Number one, it kind of brought my career full circle because I started in health and human services back in 1998. And a lot of the treatment providers and a lot of the people that were legislators and were working with the state are still in those roles. And it was just exciting to be able to come to them, really raise awareness about actually what happens at casinos and with operators when it comes to responsibility, and also really be able to talk to them about ways that they could work with me again and at Bally's. And it was just a really pivotal moment to really bring back to Chicago all the great things that Bally's doing.
Awesome. So you did mention something that I want to go into a little bit. You started your career in health and human services, but you've been in gaming for a while now. So I was just
Yeah.
kind of curious about your career path and what led you to gaming and how and why did your career evolve?
Yeah, so my first, real job was working in PR and marketing, and I was a very junior person, and I was basically responsible for promoting all of our programs. So I worked for a wonderful organization called HRDI, and they provided services for substance abuse, mental health, and they also had programs of problem gambling. And in fact, we were one of the first agencies to provide problem gambling services in the state of Illinois. Basically, it was working with different legislators, whether it be the Illinois Black Caucus, and to talk about things that we needed to, protect our consumers at the time for their behavioral health and human service needs. As I started to work on my MBA, the CEO of the company, his name is Dr. Vincent Bakeman. He asked me, what do you want to do? What's inspiring you to continue in your career and with your education? And I'm like, I want to do what you do one day. And I didn't mean it like being a CEO, because that is not anything that I'd like to do. But he worked with the United Nations. And I was really fascinated in the fact that he would get a chance to be sort of a voice from the Black community, specifically health and human services, and really make a difference in international markets. Sub-Saharan Africa was his region. And so one of the things that we knew is that things like mental health, substance abuse, therapy, all of those things were not things that were very well received at the time in some of the countries that we were interested in. And so when I got the opportunity, he one day just asked me if I could start attending a couple of meetings in New York. And that's how I ended up getting into working with international development and working with United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And then from there, I really, really got this bug and really loved like talking about things that people need to make their lives better. And it became something I was passionate about. How I got into gaming from that is that state of Illinois at the time was one of those states that if they were having funding issues, they would not pay health and human service providers. And I was not one of those people. I was very young, and I wasn't one of those people that could miss paychecks. And although I understood, there were things that needed to be done in this state, I still have bills to pay. So I started looking at ways that I could still do good, but I wanted to work in corporate. I wanted to actually be able to work for a corporation in a way that I could still do good for people. At the time, my mentor was Senator Maddie Hunter, who's from Illinois. She knew about the fact that the Illinois Lottery was up to have the first private management agreement. And the company that I eventually went to work for, G-Tech, became IGT. They were the first managers of the Illinois Lottery. And so they had this role, corporate social responsibility. And as I looked into it, it was a lot of what was required were things that I was really good at. So it was like writing, working with underrepresented, communities. Problem gambling was something that I was very familiar with. And it just resonated with me, and I never even knew that anything like this existed. And so my first role was, working for North Star Lottery Group, and I was the manager of corporate social responsibility. And I just became fascinated with everything that went into it, and that's just kind of how I changed my career.
Very interesting, very interesting. So, you've worked with several gaming organizations. What are some of the biggest wins and proudest achievements in your career thus far?
I think my biggest achievements are having an opportunity to work with these great organizations on building their responsible gaming programs from the ground up. I think that what I learned at North Star, then IGT, became very pivotal because I learned that I love accreditations. I love anything that has to do with regulations. I loved working with the legal team. I never even knew this part of myself. And I think that one of the first goals I had was to ensure that the Illinois Lottery received its certification through the World Lottery Association. And it was something that I had never done. And when I achieved it, I was like, I can't even believe I did that. And then it just became something that I became good at. And then I was able to learn from, some of our colleagues at IGT in Italy who were doing amazing things. Shout out to Stefania Colombo because she's amazing. And I really just started to work on things that were greater just my day to day that, made me be in a position where I could really showcase what organizations were doing, whether you were a supplier, whether you were a lottery, whether you were a casino company. I just love telling the stories of the great ways that these companies protect their consumers. And I love to show all the ways that it's embedded within their operations. So my greatest achievement is every single time I'm able to get an accreditation for an organization. I was able to first have an impact at North Star, and then later I was able to achieve this for Rush Street Interactive. Now I'm working on that with Bally's. And so it's just something that each time it happens, I learn more, and it just makes me feel proud to say that I had a part in it.
Yeah, you told me a little bit about that when we talked before about like kind of your specialty when it comes to responsible gaming, and it is certifications. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about like kind of what an organization has to do to get certifications and why they're important?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's several different certifications out there. I think the two that I'm most familiar with are the World Lottery Association, which is an accreditation that lotteries can work towards achieving their level one, two, three, and four. And each level, they have to demonstrate, different aspects of their business and how they are responsible in protecting consumers. So that's everything from looking at responsible advertising. It's how are you communicating with your players? How is your stakeholder engagement? Are you doing anything for research? Then I learned about there's this great accreditation RG check, and that is for casinos and interactive. And again, it's a set of standards that an operator must look at all aspects of its business, and it takes stock, what are you doing, and then ways that you can also continually improve your program. Every jurisdiction that a gaming company goes into, you have to provide some sort of responsible gaming program. So that's just like the first level. But for those organizations that really want to take it to the next level, I think going through accreditations makes you better because it makes you look inward within your operations. And I have been very grateful to work for organizations that really care about this and they really want to put themselves to the test.
Interesting. So you've developed and overseen a lot of different responsible gaming programs. So what, in your opinion, do you think makes a good and impactful responsible gaming program?
I think that it has to be a culture. I think your leadership, if you do not have a leader who believes in it, and when I say it, I mean the protection of consumers and safeguards. I think that's key. That's the first way. You can't do anything without that. But second, I think it's always wanting to see if there are other ways that you can, further, prevent risk. I think one of the benefits that I had was being so connected to the treatment community and knowing that prevention is it's one thing for a person to already have those risky behaviors and then ultimately, be at risk to self-exclude or anything that they feel they may need to support their gambling to keep it safe. But I feel that being able to communicate, so you're looking at ways to prevent it, you're looking at ways to communicate, and then you're also have to have those resources available at the ready when they need them. So I think those are, first it's got to be top down, and then your pillars have to focus on prevention, communication, and resourcefulness in order to be successful, in my opinion.
Definitely, definitely. And so, how has the approach to that kind of changed or evolved since you've been in the gaming industry? Is there still a lot of change that's going on in the way that people approach responsible gaming today, or is it something that's kind of leveled out over time?
No, it's actually a really exciting time in the industry. When I first started, it was really, like I said, I was more so looking at it from a lottery perspective. And even just knowing that lotteries like are holding themselves to a standard, that was fascinating. And then I think as gaming started to expand into different platforms and it became more prevalent, I think the industry really took a look at itself to say, what do we need to be doing? And I love the fact that there are so many different voices in this space that there's never a dull moment. We can never rest on the latest research that came out because there's new gaming and there's new forms of playing. So we always have to be ahead of the curve of what's coming next. And I really love that as the industry has evolved, so has the lens that's looking at consumer protection. Again, even having those opposing voices when it comes to gambling is very important, because that's another way for you to check yourself to make sure that you actually are doing the best that you can do. And I can tell you that at all of the different operators that I've met, there are some very passionate people that are committed to consumer protection and responsible gaming and preventing problem gambling. And I think to see more people now employed at gaming companies that are, presenting on the things that they're doing, it's fascinating. And I think it's just going to continue to get better and better.
Absolutely. How would you say that responsible gaming programs and problem gambling programs differ? Because I know that you have a lot of experience in both.
So responsible gaming is more, I would say it's more on tools and like limit setting. It's more about education. It's more, I think, about those preventative ways of keeping your gambling safe. Where problem gambling, it does have all of those elements, but I feel that it has more ways for people to do things like exclude or get help, or families to have resource and understanding. So that's how I will see the difference. I mean, there are problem gambling councils that are strictly about problem gambling resources and giving people the help they need when they need it. And then there are some that are very focused on having, focusing on the prevention, the responsible gaming, the awareness of it, and then still having the tools to help people self-exclude and get the resources that they need. So those are the ways that I think that there's a difference. But they're all basically, I would say that they have the same elements of one another. It's just, I believe that the problem gambling is more for when that person really feels like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. And this is now, or a family member or a loved one, So I think it's having those resources available rather than limit setting. Here's ways that you can stop.
So you've talked a lot about the impacts that you and your colleagues have made, but is there anything that you think people misunderstand about the work that you and other professionals within the RG space do?
I think that one, that because we work at competing operation like gaming companies, that we don't we don't compete in this space, right? I think people don't really see how much collaboration that goes on between us. When we all see each other at conferences, we're all very supportive of the work that we're doing. We may compete when it comes to handle or, revenue and things like that. But when it comes to responsible gaming consumer protection, this is an area that we share knowledge. And I think that that is something that I just want people to know that it's a safe space for all of us to be competitors. We meet in the middle when it comes here. And I think the other thing is that people in the public may view us as just figureheads, right? Oh, they're just, got this person, just because they want to be able to save face. And that's not true either. I mean, maybe there are gaming companies that do approach it like that, but I can say that for all the companies that I've worked at, it's been genuine. It comes from the top down. It is part of the culture. And so I just, would love to dispel the myth that we're just here as the face of, but we're really not committed to doing things. Like, that's also a misconception. So those two.
So many people in the responsible gaming space also talk about the concept of sustainable play. And can you kind of explain that concept and how it relates to responsible gaming?
So the thing about sustainable play is that, you know, operators prefer to have customers that are with them for a long time, not just like a short time. So when we talk about sustainability, we talk about the fact that, we want customers to be aware of ways that they can set limits, maybe take cool offs, things like that, because the last thing we want is for someone to play, and then they burn out, because that's not sustainable. Now you've lost that player because they have A, run out of money, B, self-excluded because they knew they had a problem, or something else may have happened where they just decided that your platform wasn't for them. You want sustainable players because they build, loyalty. They know that, you care about them. And that's where the communication comes in. When things are looking a little bit different to maybe your customers play, and it's really being able to communicate the differences and bring things to their attention. It's about being able to have as many tools as possible on the site or within the casinos to really remind them to take breaks, keep your gaming safe. So that's what we mean about sustainability is rather than just playing just for the Super Bowl and then that's it, why don't you play with us through the tennis, season and then later hockey, and so those are the kinds of things. It's really about having a positive entertainment journey with us.
And I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier about the misconceptions and how you don't just want to be figureheads and you want to be able to, support people and keep them safe while they're enjoying themselves.
Hmm, hmm.
And so, based on what you've told me, there are a lot of, great guidelines and systems in place to protect players, but what should operators be doing more of to make gaming safer for players, in your opinion?
I think the next frontier is really focusing on, machine learning and AI, just different ways of tracking player behavior, understanding it so that you can have those key touch points during their play to let them know ways that they can make change behavior. I think that is really, if I were to put back on my treatment hat, from those days, it's really about what were the preventive measures that changed behavior, right? I think that's one way is just more of an emphasis on machine learning and understanding, player behavior. And I also would like to see more resources around families because a lot of the research will show us that it's really the families and loved ones that are very affected. And they're usually the ones that are calling customer service and they're the ones that are saying this person has a problem. I know there's like Singapore and Australia where families have much more of a say so in a player's exclusion. And I know that can be very controversial at times, but I do hope to see ways that we can find as an industry to pay attention more to the loved ones. We get calls all the time about, people concerned that their loved one is wasting their children's college tuition or they're mortgaging away the house. How can you, why can't you make them stop? So I really would love to find ways to more empower families. I know in Nevada, they do a lot of great things. Stephanie Goodman, through her work, she's doing amazing things. And I'm sure there are a lot of great programs. I know the National Council on Problem Gambling has an entire like pamphlet resource, for families. So I just would like to see that evolve a little bit more. So, those would be my two areas.
Nice. So you kind of answered my next question, which was going to be how do you see responsible gaming and problem gambling programs changing over the next few years? Is there kind of anything else besides, that impact on families that you can think of?
I mean, I think that maybe, and I don't know yet if it's good or bad. I think there's going to be a lot of more emphasis on advertising. I think it's really coming soon. I just hear that, a lot of the jurisdictions are not happy. A lot of key stakeholders really feel like there's just too much. I know that lawmakers are really trying to work with operators, and I love to see those collaborations, really listening, but there's jurisdictions like New York that are just leading the way, I think, in a lot of ways. You're like, look, my number needs to be huge. We need to have a QR code so that everybody can get resources when they need them. I mean, I just love to see that forward thinking. So I don't know. One of my bosses said her favorite phrase was regulate yourself before you get regulated. And I think when it comes to the area of advertising, maybe let's take a tool from, Ontario. One of Ontario's requirements for licensees is that you have to do a responsible gaming campaign and spend a percentage, of your funds. And that's really groundbreaking because now not only are you saying that you can do advertising, but you have to do problem gambling. And you have to have KPIs, right? You have to tell us, tell them, who are you marketing to? What was the campaign? How successful was it? And the other great jurisdiction is Ohio. So I know Colorado is doing some things. So I think that as time goes on, there's going to be more, I don't even want to call them restrictions, but maybe guardrails to ensure that things don't end up like the UK, where there's like a ban on this, there's a ban on that. And I'm just hoping that over time we can continue to work with traders like the American Gaming Association, who's doing amazing things. So I think just is one thing that I can say, just more restrictions. But I think if we can just as an industry get ahead of those and maybe learn some from other jurisdictions, I think that will prevent things from possibly getting too restricted. And I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. It's kind of interesting to me how you talk about how different jurisdictions are doing different things. So why is there such a gap when it comes to, the different people, places that are doing really great things with RG and people that are still kind of behind and need to step it up a little bit?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think a lot of regulations were written, years ago based on strictly casino operations. And I think what's happened is sports betting and, different forms of gaming have increased. I think a lot of laws have been or regulations have been created that are a little bit more current. So I don't want to say that it's one jurisdiction is doing maybe not as much because they're not interested. It's just that sometimes there's like you can't change gaming law that fast, That's what I've learned because I've asked the same questions. So things take time. Also, I think that the key stakeholders within those different states, speaking up about different things, there's not one blanket issue, right? I mean, they listen to their own consumers, they're the citizens within that state. And I think the laws promote that. But what is very universal is that as gaming has expanded, so is the expectation to have programs that address problem gambling. Now, they may not prescribe exactly what you have to do. Sometimes jurisdictions just want to see, like, what are you going to come up with? So I think that it's not one size fits all. Different jurisdictions are at different levels of their, regulations. But I do think it's just a matter of time before everything starts to kind of mirror each other more and more.
Very interesting. We're going to kind of wrap this up now, but you've accomplished so much and found a lot of success in gaming. So, like, what advice would you give to young professionals just starting out in the gaming industry, whether that's, in responsible gaming or just in different areas of the gaming industry?
I think really network and use LinkedIn, join African Americans in gaming if you are Black or African American from the diaspora. Look at GGW, Global Gaming Women. These are very powerful organizations. Follow the American Gaming Association. They're always talking about the state of the state. Really clue into, National Council on Problem Gambling. They have webinars all the time about different aspects of the industry. I think you have to take more. There's so many resources out there. I think to be successful in this day and age, you just have to really go for it, jump in, network, and figure out what works for you and what you're passionate about. But if you don't look into these different areas and recognize the great resources for networking that are out there, then you're kind of limiting yourself. The gaming industry, everyone sort of knows everyone. And, I think that you just have to kind of do a lot of homework to find out where your passion lies. You might be wanting to be an attorney and never even knew that there's a whole, gaming law side. You may not even know that you could maybe one day be a regulator. I mean, so it's really tapping into these great resources and just learning as much as you can and do and internships. A lot of these companies are offering internships and you should absolutely take advantage of those because that's the best way to see what goes on behind the scenes of a gaming company.
Yeah, and I'm very new to the industry myself, so those groups that you mentioned, like that's just a great way to kind of make a community. And I think that, being involved in GGW has kind of helped me better understand the industry too, because there are so many different parts of it that you don't even really consider if you're on the outside looking in.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say, a lot of the people like Anika Howard with, Wonder Nation, Kate DeBone with AGA, all of these women are very approachable, right? I think that's the other thing is that don't be afraid to inbox someone, to say, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. These are all women that have come through, and like our whole purpose in my mind is to look back and see how we can make it easier, right? So I think that, we're all a really great group of people within this industry. And I just encourage people to get to know us because you might be surprised.
That's a great way to wrap it up. So, thank you so much, Tammi, for joining me today. I really enjoyed
Thank
our discussion.
you.
I learned a lot, and I'm sure that our listeners will as well. But thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Level Up with Wondr. Visit wondernation.com/level up for more podcast episodes about how we're reimagining the gaming entertainment industry. Want to level up your business? Visit our contact page at wondernation.com to inquire about our strategic consulting or management services.